Hello and welcome to this week's KLNS Rugby podcast as we reconvene to run through yet another enthralling weekend of Champions Cup and Challenge Cup semi-final action between Croke Park and Toulouse. We have plenty to discuss. Joining me tonight, we have returnees in the form of ball handling hooker and Chrissy Hawkins, jubilant from the weekend, I am sure. So welcome back to you both, folks.
Thanks for having us.
And also on the show, we have a first-time guest. He's a Bath fan with a deep knowledge of the Irish game and hopefully not too much of a vendetta against rivals Gloucester. So welcome to the show, Mr. Alex Fulton. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No problem at all. It's good to have everyone here. Big weekend of rugby, and we will start with the biggest game of all, a sold-out Croke Park, as Leinster secured their place in an eighth European Cup final, courtesy of a narrow 20-17 victory over Northampton Saints. A hat-trick from James Lowe had them what we thought home and host, but George Hendy and Tom Seabrook's late tries narrowed the gap to lead to a suspenseful climax. Chrissy, we spoke about it before we hit record, like an unbelievable occasion, cracking game of rugby, but Leinster just about get the job done, and it's not going to be the same conversation as the last few years because they got an important win, but a narrow win.
Yeah, I genuinely had about 10 minutes there where I thought they were about to break my heart again. Because I have been, unfortunately, pretty much front and centre for the last two Heineken Cup finals. So I was like, I don't know, it was like they really tried hard not to win that game for the last 20 minutes. But like, it was unreal being in Croker, being back. I was there in 2009 as well. And just the atmosphere and the crack, and like I was near the hill and everyone just kept going the whole time just singing, so that was really good, even though Leinster just really stressed me out.
Yeah, that's understandable. It was a weird game in that regard, and even you could sense that kind of palpable tension start to kick in first with Hendy's try, but especially when Seabrook went in and there's 5 minutes on the clock. And I feel like everyone, for anyone who wasn't there, the clocks were positioned in the four corners of the ground. There was none on like the actual stand. So everyone was just looking over and it's like, oh God, there's a lot more time left in this game than we all assumed. And there was kind of that look between people, but I think that's what made it
Oh,
like
it was diagonally across from where I was sitting, and I literally was going from like, oh jeez, 75, okay, 76, lads, hold on to the ball, please.
it was it was tense, and I could sense that. I know you were the far side of the stadium to what I was, but I could definitely sense not just you but other people as well. Um, Alex, I'll come to you next. Like as we said, it was an unbelievable game from a neutral perspective, but just to quickly touch on Northampton Saints, they must be absolutely kicking themselves. They only played about 20-30 minutes of rugby in this game and came out 3 point defeat in a huge crowd like that. Like surely home advantage is worth more than 3 points.
Yeah, you would have thought so. I mean, they had in the first half, I think it was a 9-1 unforced error count in sort of Saints really looked nervous. They were shaken. Alex Mitchell in particular threw a few dodgy passes. So if they'd cut those out, I think they would have been well ahead come that last 10 minutes. Leinster kind of kicked very similarly throughout the game, but it was Saints unforced errors that were handing them position and territory.
And that's kind of the usual part when you see a team play Leinster as well. There's always that sense of, that Leinster will kind of force you into making mistakes, but some of them were just really poor at times, like simple pass and over. I think it's James Ram, the winger, who overran two or three passes, including one with the try line
Yeah,
beckoning.
he had two line breaks on basically, and he overran both times, overran the pass and then dropped it.
And like that, you can't do that. And like some of it is definitely nerves. There's no doubt about that. But you can't afford to do that in a European semi final. And BHH, I'll come to you next because this is where experience matters. Because Leinster, it was a mixed bag. The set piece probably got the rub of the green in some of the scrums because it certainly wasn't their best day. But the lineout was good. Attack was kind of firing until it didn't. As a collective, what did you make of the Leinster performance and what stood out to you?
I think you nailed it there with experience. I probably disagree. I don't think the attack fired almost at all. Like reviewing the first half this morning, the I'd say you could count on one hand the amount of times Leinster got over the game line outside of first phase for the for the first 43 minutes up until they got all of their points. You know, it was Northampton forcing the issue in attack, and then probably an underrated Northampton defensive performance was knocking them back. I think one of the things about Croke Park that wasn't really mentioned was how the dimensions of the pitch were different. It was a much narrower field. That meant that there's less space. There's more time for both defenses to double up on attack and stop players on the gain line. Like, how many times did you see Caelan Doris carry the ball and then just get dropped back? Or how many times maybe did you see Leinster go wide off a scrum, gain a couple of yards, and then not get more than 5 meters within the next 6 or 7 phases before Jameson Gibson Park does something just batshit crazy, and then James Lowe is able to go over in the corner, you know? Like, it is that quick tap when Northampton are switched off that got them the first score. It's the knee-knobber defense that allows Ross Byrne to get the intercept that sets up the second score from a line-out. You know, it's Leinster didn't have to do anything in attack to win this game, and Northampton were trying to force things, and it didn't work for them. And Leinster's experience got them over the line.
I think there's probably, you mentioned the dimensions of the pitch and how Leinster played. I think that's a really good point, because up until maybe the hour mark, I was trying to count how often Leinster used a wide forward. Like, having the likes of Baird and Sheehan, who was typically the guys they'll have on the edges, can make such a huge difference. We've seen it at Munster with Thomas Ahern, for instance, Dave McCann at Ulster, Baird and Sheehan with Ireland at times, and Leinster. But I only counted 2 or 3 times that the furthest wide forward ever touched the ball in the game. Leinster played a very narrow game plan. Typically, when they got to the edges, it was to James Lowe, and about half the time he was kicking that ball downfield, which part of the game plan, completely understand that. And I think that's probably where you could have some reservations heading into the Toulouse game, where, you know, we do say, oh, to beat Leinster, you have to score 25, 30 points. Toulouse can. Toulouse easily can score 25, 30 points on anyone. And if our Leinster are going to be able to, if it goes down that kind of route, I think Leinster are going to be hoping it's another final type game, proper knockout game again. And like Francois Crowe got man of the match yesterday for Toulouse. In another world, Courtney Laws probably gets man of the match for Northampton if they had got over the line, because he was supreme throughout. I thought Gerardo Augustus was absolutely fantastic in number 8 as well, and Alex Coles as well in the second row. Like, they did play well, but ultimately you do have questions. I think it leaves with more questions than answers, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's better than winning by 30 points. And like, such a narrative thing to say, but maybe it is better than steamrolling someone.
Yeah, it probably is. You know, I don't think Leinster's attack has been as good this year without Lancaster as without this year without, you know, with Lancaster leaving. But I think their defense has come on leaps and bounds, and I think that could be what gets them over the line, because, you know, you say Toulouse our attack is incredible, but Leinster's defense is absolutely phenomenal. Like, Northampton's defense was great yesterday, but Leinster weren't giving Northampton an inch in defence either, and there's jackal threats all over the pack, and with Nienaber's pressure and line speeds, it's going to make it tough for any team.
I do agree there, and I would be of the opinion that Lancaster's, what he did best was the phase play stuff. I think Goodman is brilliant at first phase launch to second phase launch. They do that really well. We've seen 1 or 2 moments where they did get to the edges, and they did exploit, you know, put Northampton under pressure. Robbie Henshaw made 1 half break early on. Then James Lowe gets down the left-hand channel, and they do go forward off those launches, but it is that kind of phase play that would worry you. But at the same time, you can't really be too critical either, because we talk about experience, and like Chrissy, I'll come to you on this one, because you want your best players to stand up in the big moments, and you see Caelan Doris and Jack Conan getting over a ball, winning a crucial turnover. Obviously that they maintain possession off the line out, and yes, there was qualms from certain commentators about in from the side, which just was not true. It was a free for all where any penalty could have been given, and just leave it at that. But big players step up in big games. Toss Sheehan, Gibson Park, James Lowe, and then at the end with Conan and Doris. that's probably the bit that you take away. If you want a big positive from Leinster, that's probably where you come away from it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Like, and this was a like by all accounts not a great game, but they didn't throw it away. They actually got over the line. So it was tough. And yes, they nearly threw it away. But you see that difference today. They they came out firing. Northampton came back. They did get a bit messy. But when they counted at the end, like the lads stood up and they kept them out for that last little bit. And that is, to me, that is more a better win than us destroying someone by 30, 40 points. They need a game like that, especially if they're coming in against Toulouse. Because, Toulouse, we have beaten them in the last couple of years, but now we've also broken the curse of by beating La Rochelle. So now
The
I'm worried.
cycle is
even more
broken,
worried.
unfortunately.
Yeah, we've broken it, so Toulouse might get us. But no, I think we always respect Toulouse. They are a very strong team. They're a really good outfit, and I think to have a game like that before the final against Toulouse was really important for Leinster, I think.
No, it is, and I suppose it's not really entirely transferable. Like Alex Mitchell's a fine player, he's not Dupont, and like Finn Smith's a fine player, he's not Interpack, and I get all that, but like you mentioned, like I said, Francois Crowe got man of the match. Courtney Laws was important.
Yeah.
Like Curtis Langdon, I thought had a big game around the park. Pietro Mavaca had a big game for Toulouse, and there is some transferables there. Alex, I might just come on to you just to stay on Leinster for a minute, because a lot of talk is about the bench, and probably my big takeaway coming away from it is Leinster's bench. Like, it probably wasn't enough to get over the line the last two finals, and it might be a bit weaker at the moment, especially when you've no Hugo Keenan in the 23, no Gary Ringrose, no James Ryan. How important is it for you that they get those lads back in there? Keenan in particular, arguably, because they just seem to attack and defend better with him there. No disrespect to Frawley. How important is it that they get some big names back there and get a full 23-man effort, as opposed to kind of 19, 20-man that we've kind of become used to?
Agreed. It's hugely important, isn't it? I think so. It was around 55 minutes when Porter and Furlong went off, I think, and you could see there was a noticeable drop in defence and in attack at that point. Obviously, you're bringing on Cian Healy with record Champions Cup appearances, but yeah, that was noticeable. I think also with Keenan, you get more backfield coverage compared to Frawley, and towards the end in particular, I thought Lowe and Lama looked like they were blowing a bit. And I think with Keenan, he probably soaks up a bit of their work rate and gives them more breathers when they need it. So having Keenan back and some strong front row forwards on the bench is going to be key to keeping Toulouse shut down.
That's it. And I think, like, I'm a huge Hugo Keenan fan. I'm not the only one. I'd say 90% of the people listening to this are huge Hugo Keenan fans.
How could you not be?
Say it like, well, there was certain people who thought Freddie Stewart was better than there for a while. We won't get into that.
That's just
He
chat,
was
isn't
not
it?
that. He was never that good.
You'd be surprised what you read from pundits who also think, that the Roman Entamak tackle yesterday was a red card, which it just wasn't. But I do want to just move off this one in a minute. But obviously, Leinster go into a third final in a row now. Remarkably, it's Leinster's 8th final. It's Toulouse's 8th final. They've never met in a final before. But Chrissy has kind of, I would say, the strongest Leinster fan in the room. We'll put it that way. Where do you think their chances are as of now? And with Ospreys and Ulster to come in the next 2 weeks, do you think it's a case now where it's right? Well, let's just try and iron out the cracks, as opposed to, let's just rest up again.
I like to think let's iron out the cracks, but I have a strong feeling that we're going to see a lot of the kids back for Ospreys. Like, no matter, even though it is better to keep the guys rotating through, they always prefer the Champions Cup. I was surprised they didn't send more experienced players down to South Africa, because we needed the points. So I think it'll be the same. I think we might see a few more experienced lads against Ulster, just partially in the pride sense, and get them a little bit of game time before. But I was actually, after the game, I was like, third time lucky we'll get the 5th star, and then I realized it's actually the 4th time we're going for the 5th star. So
That's true.
yeah,
Won the first 4 finals, then lost the next 3.
Next 3, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been there for all of them bar Bilbao, so the last three haven't been great days for me. And I should be at this one, so ideally they can not do that to me again, please.
Hopefully there's that side of it. The only thing about it is, and I don't know if there's ever a right time to bring this up without sounding like an old man giving out for no reason, but the kickoff is at 3 o'clock in the day, and I just don't like that. Not for a European Cup final. It should be like 5, half 5, maybe even half 4, like 3 o'clock. No,
Yeah, 3 o'clock's
not for
very
me.
early, and yes, I agree. And I'm literally on the other side of it as well. When they played Leicester and it was 8 p.m., I was like, lads, come on now, this is far too late. This is bedtime. um, like, we're not French. There was no French teams. It made no sense for it to be at 8 o'clock. So yeah, I
That's
agree.
true.
Very early in the day. Not a big fan of that either. 5 o'clock is like half 5 is like the perfect time, I think, for matches.
I think the FA Cup
Is
final is a big reason for it. But we'll
yeah,
wait and see.
I was
Alex, you were
gonna
going to jump
say
in.
I was gonna say the FA Cup final. I think the Met Police would be a bit stretched if they were both the same kickoff time. So I'm sure they'll
Yeah,
move stuff around to suit, but sadly
there's like
rugby will always
45
get shuffled
minutes.
by
Yeah, like
football, won't it?
yeah, it will. And like no disrespect intended, but like, there's a reason why one of them's in Wembley and one of them's in the Spurs Stadium. It's nice and all the Spurs Stadium is.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
BHH, I might just throw it to you to close things off. Like Leinster in another final, yes. Is there anything else that kind of stood out from you from this game that you feel like deserves a mention, be it good or bad?
Um, no, not particularly. We covered it all pretty well. It's it's a good sign for Leinster that they can recognize when things aren't working and then move on to other things and adapt. And it's something that I think we've seen Ireland do pretty well, and it's the same players doing it in now for Leinster, and I think it bodes well, and hopefully they can bring it home now in a couple of weeks.
I'm not sure that everyone listening to this will be rooting for Leinster because it is Toulouse and Toulouse are the aristocrats.
Everyone.
But it promises to be a cracking final. And I think that's the main thing. And for anyone who doesn't want to listen to us talk about the Toulouse game, we will have in-depth coverage of the Champions Cup final yet again this year, and hoping to have a few guests, probably a few hungover guests on the recap, but we'll see how that one goes because there's going to be a lot of Irish people over in London for that final. But we will move on to Stadium de Toulouse next as the tournament's most successful side return to, as I said, their 8th final. A brace of tries from Sevens and 15 superstar Antoine Dupont, helping the host to a 38-26 victory over Harlequins. PHH, I'll come back to you. Like, it was another classic, lots of frantic rugby. Some might say it was just very typical considering it was Toulouse against Quins, but what did you make of it?
I think those some people would be right. It was glorious as a complete neutral just to be able to put the feet up and watch it because as fantastic as the defenses were in Croke Park, this was the complete opposite. This was two attacks close to their peak form and two defenses that were not, let's say, to be generous. Look, it's what you want in a game. You were entertained. There was some fantastic rugby. There was one team, Toulouse, got a very big lead, and it looked like Harlequins had yet another mountain to climb, and then they got 2 tries, and you think, oh, are they going to do it again? And it was in the balance for 70 minutes, and that's really all you want for a semi-final. It had drama, excitement, and jeopardy. That's what you want from sport.
It really is, and it's so cliched to say, but like last year we had two of the big. I think we did the biggest washout of a semi-final weekend with La Rochelle Exeter and Leinster Toulouse. So to have two cracking games was a huge bonus. Now I only seen one of them, but I was at one of them, so we'll let it be. I won't be too disappointed with it. Alex, BHH mentioned there with that kind of jouet element, plenty of great attack with some fantastic tries, I think it's fair to say. But it's hard not to think that Toulouse's looseness is just going to play right into Leinster's hands. We mentioned earlier with that Shackney Naber defence.
Yeah, you'd imagine that Gibson Park, who I think is probably best 9 on the planet at the minute, even compared to Dupont, he's playing some insane rugby. I think if you give him that space and time and open play that Toulouse gave Quins. I think he will just pick them apart and put people, Henshaw, Lowe, Lama, into all kinds of space and just run it in from wherever you want, really. I mean, Toulouse do have some great strike runners. You've got Cost and Labelle, who are, usually running it in from all positions on the park. But yeah, I think if you give Leinster that time and you let their defence smother you like that, then Gibson Park will pick you apart in attack and they will just consume you in defence.
No, that's the word. And there's kind of the buzzword about Ireland that also applies to Leinster is probably the relentlessness. And yeah, Toulouse have a small bit of it if you give them enough possession, but I think they also don't have enough of it, but still loads of time before we get into that. I do think it's a fascinating matchup because of the fact that like Dupont hasn't had a huge pile of 15s this year. Granted, he's at one Dupont, and they probably you just leave it at that. You draw the line in the sand there. But Roman Entamac hasn't had a huge amount of minutes. Like Thomas Ramos isn't getting into the match at 23, which probably helps strengthen how strong their 23 is. It's a gettable Toulouse team, but at the same time, like what's different from their team that played last year? Cost, who's a young player, exciting player, fair enough, and Blair Kinghorn. And no disrespect to Blair Kinghorn, but he's not the needle mover. You feel like you need Entamac and Dupont to go to another level. You need Entamac to actually play the full 80 against Leinster, which he has been unfortunate not to do in recent meetings. And those recent games are going to be talked about a lot, aren't they, Chrissy? Because like met in the 2019 semi-final and pool stages, the 2022 semi-final, 2023 semi-final, Leinster won them. They won them comfortably. The one caveat is probably 2022 where Toulouse had to play an extra time game a week prior. But so much weight is going to be put into them by pundits. How much weight would you put into those previous matchups?
I think like we have been quite dominant on them, and like last year we just absolutely walked all over them as well, which I was very surprised that I was expecting a much tougher game. But I think you kind of have to move on from that. This is different now. Like Leinster have different coaches in. We're doing different style play. I'm actually in a sense I'm kind of surprised that Ramos is not making into the team because like he has that that batshit crazy element that really I think helps to lose. And yeah, I think since last year, like Gibson Park has 100% leveled up. Like I don't know what happened to him the last couple of months, but I didn't think he'd go to another level, but he did, and I'm really excited to see him against Dupont in this series because like that's gonna be really interesting. But yeah, I think it's all great talking about that we have this running form against them, but on the same thing, La Rochelle had the running form against winning us, and we beat them twice this year. So I think, yes, it may give us an element of an edge, of psychological edge, but I don't think so. When it comes to a final, Toulouse they're just unreal. They have the vintage, they are the originals, like, so I think you have to push that to the side and focus on that game. And I still think we have the strength to beat them. And I didn't get to see the game against Queens. I watched the highlights. And I really regret not getting to see the game. But I think, yeah, we do have that little bit of stronger defense, which will play into our hands a little bit now.
I would agree. The one thing that you touched on there that I kind of forgot is Toulouse in general, they don't really lose a lot of finals. They win a lot of top 14 finals. They've won the last 2 European finals that they've been in. I think it's like 3 of the last 4 that they've been in or something in and around that. Like they are winners, but at the same time, they don't have a bank of experience of beating Leinster. They haven't exactly been in as many European finals as Leinster, and it's been a team that, to be fair, probably doesn't get talked about enough. Leinster are built on cohesion, but so are Toulouse. Toulouse were kind of that for France for a while, and they've had an awful lot of injuries and chopping and changing this year. How will that affect things? I don't know. And like personally, I think Leinster will win. I think they could win handily if Toulouse do what they've done in the last couple of years and they just make some really stupid tactical decisions, like when they moved Dupont out to 10 last year when he was he was just cleaning things up at 9, and then they move him to 10, and he's just not
You know, he
an
went out
impact
to
in
the
the game.
wing because they had an injury. They had an injury and he went out
That
to the
was
wing.
it. It was 2 years ago
And
he went
he
to
was
10 then.
just like,
Sorry.
it is the biggest waste of time ever. Like, it was literally like they've just completely ruined their whole, like, he was just standing out there doing nothing. Like,
Yeah,
don't put DuPont on the wing. I don't care how slow your second number 9 is. You do not put him out on the wing.
and like you mentioned Gibson Park, that matchup is huge because Gibson Park has just gone to a new level, just even since the Six Nations, I think. Yeah, like he had a good Six Nations, but he's gone to another level since then. It's going to be so
And
important.
Saturday, him and Lowe were just like telepathic. It was just every time it was just like Gibson Park gets the
Genuine.
ball, Lowe is gone.
Yeah, and I didn't get a chance to mention it. You remind me there. James Lowe needs to be buying Dan Sheehan a pint for number one, the line out try on this, or the line out throw on his second try. That was exquisite. It was so nice. And the offload before his third try. Like Dan Sheehan, talk about stepping up to the big moment. That was incredible. But just a little segue there. But yeah, Gibson Park's been huge. DuPont is huge for them. I think it's probably a rare occasion insofar as Toulouse is DuPont's team in general. They are like everything runs off 9. Leinster are now Gibson Park's team. You know, like they were with Sexton. I think that's really interesting. You don't see that a lot. And I always get drawn when I talk about 9s in big games. I always get drawn to Squidge's comment that you look through any really successful team, they've always had a great 9. You look at the old Toulouse teams, the old Munster teams, the old Leinster teams, they've all had high quality 9s. I don't think this game is going to book the trend regardless because you could probably pencil them both in for World Player of the Year, even if DuPont's will be in the 7s format, but you can probably pencil them in for nominations anyways. Alex, I might,
it's
or
worth
Chrissy,
mentioning
yeah.
as well, that like the Toulouse team, a lot of the Toulouse team play for France, and a lot of the Leinster team play for Ireland. So they have another thing now. France have been beaten last 2 years by Ireland. So again, there's another level of them wanting to get one over on us, I think. So that's definitely there's gonna be a lot of like fuel and a lot of reason for them to want to take us down more than just it's being a final, you know. So I think we have to like acknowledge that as well.
Whatever they do, just don't stay in Cork for the week because I can't deal with another week of all those comments. But Alex, before we move off this game, like there was 2 English sides back in the semi-finals this year for the first time since 2020, I believe it is. And to be fair, they both put up a really good fight. Northampton kind of were expected to, Quins maybe not so much. What have you made of the English team's journey from your perspective, watching the Premiership a lot more than we would?
I think losing Wasps and Worcester and London Irish as well, obviously, has helped concentrate some of the talent into the remaining 10 teams. And, you know, you look at Ollie Lawrence going to Bath and having a massive impact. And, you know, similar players doing the same thing, where you've got more players of higher quality in fewer teams. And I think it's helped bring them on a par with the teams like Leinster, or not on a par. You know, this Leinster's squad is formidable. You can't get around that fact. But the lower salary cap of the Premiership has probably not equaled out with the French, the top 14, and the URC, which doesn't have one. But you're kind of seeing the talent be concentrated, and that's definitely helped them a lot with progressing. They're playing fewer games in the Premiership, so they're probably not as tired. They've got more chance to rest and recover and focus on European matches as well. I think that's probably the main reasons why they've progressed better and further in the competitions this year.
And it's important. Like we all enjoy a good Sligo match and all that, but it is important that we have competitive sides from every nation. We had it from South Africa. We've had it. To be fair, I think Scotland could have had one with Glasgow if Glasgow didn't kind of lose the first game and just kind of a little bit of packing it in from there. Having English sides competitive again is huge. And you make that point, Alex, about concentrated talent is very important. Playing less games is very important. Like I think the Premiership, there was a period there for 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years, where they'd look at, oh, we've got, say, Leon away, but we're going to put all our eggs into playing Newcastle at home. And it's like, you could have went the other way around with this, and to see them properly, put the interest in it is huge. And like for Northampton, might just finish on them again because that's who Leinster play. Like they look very well coached. Like I think that's undoubtedly with Dowson and Sam Vesti in the team. The only thing is, for the likes of them, they're losing Courtney Laws, they're losing Lewis Ludlam, and this is across a lot of sides. And just to finish on Alex, do you think the English sides will continue to stay where they are because of the concentrated talent, or do you think they'll probably take a step back before going back forward again? Because there is a lot of players leaving the Premiership this year.
I think it's probably that second option you mentioned. You know, there is that lower salary cap fact, so older players are looking towards retirement or whatever, are looking for a final payday in France, even going to Pro D2, where you know get similar salary and you're living in the south of France. I mean, who doesn't want to do that? Yeah, so you can imagine that the academies are probably pretty full, trying to bring through homegrown players because they count for less in the cap. And yeah, so I suspect you'll see probably a couple of years, maybe a little bit weaker again, and then they'll start building up. I mean, you could see why Northampton were top of the Premiership. They looked very well coached. Sam Vesti, by the way, what an appointment. He's worked very well with Finn Smith and Mitchell to craft a good attacking scheme. But yeah, I think you'll see probably a bit of a drop off, and then hopefully once the academies start bringing through players into the senior 23 again, you'll see a bit more of a pickup as we go forward in the next sort of 5 years or so.
Absolutely.
Just on that point, I do think the academies are doing a great job over in England at the moment. You know,
They've been
England
very productive,
20s, well, even so, from this weekend, Finn Smith is very young. He's what, 21 or so.
21. Yeah.
George Hendy is quite young. They kept talking about how young this Northampton team is and how much they're going to grow. They also announced the Six Nations Under-20 Player of the Year today, and it was Henry Pollock, another guy from Northampton, who might just step straight into Lewis Ludlam's role. For Quins, you had Chandler Cunningham South, who was on that Under-20 team with Henry Pollock. So I think there's a lot of future there, and even just watching some of these young lads come through, they're especially from this year as opposed to maybe 2 or 3 years ago, they've really got something special coming through. So it's going to be very interesting to watch.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they might lose a bit of experience in the next year or two, but once those young guys get games under their belts, they'll be pretty useful, handy players, won't they? You know.
Yeah, that's the important thing.
Sometimes experience is overrated.
I think that may be the tagline of the second semi-final. It's like, who needs experience? Let's just throw the ball around and see how it goes. The most experienced man on the pitch gave away the penalty at the very end that kind of sealed it for Toulouse. So
wasn't that just stupid?
I didn't see the game. I don't know what was said on TV, but if it was anything less than that was a really, really dumb thing to do, then they were wrong.
Yeah, the ITV commentators were fully saying, why on earth would you do that? It was just completely pointless, needless and unnecessary.
Yeah, it was right up there with Fabian Palouse kicking Alan Quinlan up the ass for absolutely no reason. Of things to do in a knockout game in Europe.
Before we move off the Toulouse Quins game, I do want to just give Quins their props because they were a big factor in why that game was so entertaining to watch. You know, being able to see Caden Murley and Tyrone Green in particular in full flight and almost dragging Quins back into the game at various points. I do think they need their props for playing fantastically well. And also, I know he's mentioned already, but Paul Costas, like, to be 21, like a year out of under-20s rugby, and to be that prominent in a semi-final, and not to be overawed and almost to be one of the better players in the entire match is a little bit scary for the rest of Europe. So big props to both Costas and Quins.
I thought Finn Baxter scrummaged really well as well, considering he was up against Algeri. That he looked really super strong in that area. Considering he's only 21 as well, isn't he? I think.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and that's just another point. You know, like you're not short of the young talent over in England.
No.
What are they feeding their under-20s?
That's a different conversation before anyone gets Anthony in there. we hope it's all legal, but it is
No,
true.
no, like
They've
I
kicked
mean
on.
totally like whatever. Like no, I'm not making any any
Yeah,
digs or anything like that. But geez, the size of some of the lads coming through from England, I'm like, how does that happen?
and some of it is. And I know BHH, you kind of specialize more in this stuff with your own content. Some of it is, games and how they progress through the pathways and kind of the scale of when they do it. But some of it is just, like you don't grow up a episode of Tuolangi, for instance, naturally. That is just pure genes and a culmination of a lot of big Tuolangi genes, for instance. But it's credit to the French system and the English system that you look at Emilia and Gaetan has been incredible. Louis Bielbiari, Costas, as you mentioned as well, guys like this are just stepping up. And then Quins, as you said, like Finn Baxter, Chandler Cunningham South, Saints had Finn Smiths and Hendy, and they had someone else who was injured, who was one of their young players whose name escapes me, who had a good season, and it's good to see. Like we have our own model. Our own model works in terms of how we bring through players and all that. But at the same time, the fact that other countries have got up to scratch is good to see, because I know you look at Scotland and you look at the kind of signings that they're having to make, and how basically any Irish player, I think, with a Scottish relation has probably been looked at by Scotland in some shape or form because of their
If you
their
have like a
pathways.
drop of Scottish blood, the Scots are finding you no matter where you are in the world.
Yeah, honestly, I could do a job for them as head coach if they want. If they want a Scottish coach, I don't have Scottish blood, but we can figure that out at some stage, I suppose. But
Get you
we
in a
better
residency.
could do residency. We could. I might just move on to the Challenge Cup really quickly, because the Hollywood Bet Sharks, again, terrible name, but the Sharks and Gloucester defeated Claremont and Benetton respectively to qualify for the final on Friday, the 24th of May. BHH, I know we all only caught kind of glimpses of this, so I'll start with yourself. Sharks Gloucester could be a really interesting final and probably a good atmosphere final, but two good semi-finals there again.
Yeah, absolutely. Sharks, they beat Claremont. It was in the Stoop in London, and it was very noticeable how much of a South African crowd there was. And I think that's a credit to Sharks and what they've done in London, and hopefully that will transfer over to the final to give a good atmosphere. It was hard, hard not to think, looking at those two semi-finals, that Connacht and Ulster probably really missed the chance to go well in that competition. I know they're both soundly beaten in their respective knockout games, but better performances from either, and I think they could have definitely given Sharks and Gloucester a good running. I do have to give credit to Sharks and Claremont for another entertaining game. We were both worried about comebacks for Northampton and Quins in the Champions Cup, but Sharks actually managed to do it. They were 13 points down with 20 minutes to go against Claremont. And Claremont have thrown away a lot of leads this season, and they did yet again. It was the South African World Cup winners stepping up. I think they were down to 14 men with 10 minutes to go, and Eben Etzebeth claims a high ball on the halfway line, and it goes out to Vincent Tachuka with an outrageous offload for the winning try. And if you haven't seen it, everybody needs to stop right now and go to YouTube and look at that, because it's peak Peter Romani, it's peak Sonny Bill Williams offload, and to do it in a semi-final to win the game, what turns out to be the winning score is fantastic. So, look, Sharks are a great team on paper, and their season has been really bizarre with the amount of games they've lost, but this could be a chance for them against a very strong Gloucester team, which realistically I don't know a huge amount about. So
That's understandable. I think that
someone else.
the Sharks, I think you've nailed it there in terms of they've really underperformed this year. They've had some really terrible performances when they weren't at full strength. I think kind of the nature of, okay, if you're going to sign Etzebeth and Koch and Oxenche and Bongi and Himpi and Akanyuam and so on and so forth, you're going to need guys like Fintan Shituka to be your best player in every game of the season to kind of keep any semblance of form going. And to be fair, he's been incredible. He's been an unbelievable signing for them. But just the nature of it is there's too much changes, there's too much chopping and changing. But when you can get someone like Edspeth on the field, and no disrespect to Claremont, but like even Edspeth is the best player on that pitch. I think that's fair to say, and that's where the quality shows. Probably the one thing that's disappointing for Benetton is they will probably feel like they've let a chance go because yes, they had a couple of injuries at the wrong time, but they probably just hit a dip in form at the wrong time as well. And Gloucester, not a great team. And Alex, I might just throw it to you for that one because I would have thought Benetton had what it took, but realistically, it was all Gloucester, and they get into a final. Do you think they can push on and win it from here?
As a born and bred Bath fan, it makes me sick to see Gloucester winning, but I think they've got a great chance. Obviously, the Sharks are stacked for the South African internationals, and that's probably where their issues earlier in the season come from, in that their depth layer wasn't as strong as it needs to be. But I think Gloucester they've got a good 10 in Hastings, and they've got some good power around the park. So we'll see. It's not being played at altitude, which probably is a bit of a leveler. So we'll just have to see how they handle the likes of Etzebethan and Che. Scrummaging is going to be crucial given the strength of the Sharks pack and their strike runners in the back line. But yes, I mean, Gloucester won in 2015 and they were runners up in 17 and 18. So they've been there, done that. Obviously that team was probably a bit different to what it is now, but they've got experience in the engine room. So I think they'll be okay.
I think it's going to set up to be a decent final. I know EPCR will be hoping for a better Challenge Cup final than what we saw last year, where it's maybe as a Munster fan, I might have been slightly happy to see Glasgow getting beaten by half time, but in terms of a spectacle, it wasn't exactly ideal. It was pretty tepid. But folks, we'll leave it at that because that's all we do have time for. We will have loads of Champions Cup final coverage coming up. We will confirm that at a later date in terms of previews and reviews and the like. But for now, thanks to BHH, to Chrissy, and to Alex for taking the time to recap all of the action. In the meantime, you'll be able to catch me on the Red Army podcast for all things Munster in the URC as that reaches its crescendo. But if you do like what you see here, not just from me, but from the rest, you can follow us on our social media platforms and the like. So you can subscribe to this podcast, leave a review to make all the difference. But for now, until next time, take it easy.